Hi, everybody. It's Professor G here from Speaking with Courage, where we all work together on enhancing our public speaking skills. And today, I am going to share with you some information that's going to help you become a better presenter by creating better slides. So, today, I'm going to talk about how you can create impacting visuals for your presentation. We've all been to a presentation where the visuals are not that great, where the font is too small, where there's too much information on the slides, where there's not enough color, or the colors are just crazy bright and they're just contrasting, and you don't really get anything good out of the slides. Today, we're going to focus on some of the problems that are out there in terms of people and when they present their slides. And I'm going to talk about some of the things that you shouldn't do. Then I'm going to share with you 7 steps as well, 7 steps that are going to help you become a much better presenter with 7 tips that are going to enhance your slides and that you can apply immediately so that you can have better slides and become a more engaging presenter. And finally, I'm also going to talk about the 2 main resources that I use to create my slides so that they're bright, so that they're beautiful, so that they're more engaging. And every time I create slides, I get somebody that asks, what did I use? What program did I use? Or what was it that I did to create these slides? And as you know, you can use PowerPoint, you can use Keynote, you can use Google Slides, you can use a whole variety of things. And I'll talk about the 2 main resources that I use that you can use as well, and they're free so that you can create amazing slides. So let's talk about the main problems first with visual aids in general. And this is from years and years and years of presentations that I've been to. I go to presentations at a college level, at high school level. I go to presentations in the community, from organizations, at the business level. I also go to presentations that are done for the city of San Diego or for the school district that I belong to. So I get to see a lot of visuals, and some of the main issues that I see are going to be talked about right now in a couple of seconds. But this is a visual that I saw in another presentation, in another video recently, and it's just a really great cartoon, and it says "Death by PowerPoint," and a lot of the presentations die because of the very, very poorly made visuals that some people might present. Your presentation is supposed to be enhanced by the visuals. You're supposed to use visuals to enhance, to clarify, to make your presentation better. So if you don't have really good visuals, it's just going to drag it down. It's going to be an anchor, and it's going to be something that is going to be more of a blemish and more of a setback in your presentation and in your performance than otherwise. So don't let PowerPoints kill your presentation. So this is one example of a horrible presentation or a horrible slide where you see a lot of things going on here. You see colors that are just too bright, fonts that have multiple colors. They're just very hard to read. You will see, the fonts on the top, the simplification, 4th dimension, all those fonts are just very difficult to read, very difficult to just follow along. It's just busy all over the place. And then the background has a bunch of images and a bunch of blurry stuff that's just not going to help the presentation and the people in the audience. Somebody in the front might be able to make sense of a slide like this. Somebody in the back is definitely not going to be able to make sense of a slide like this. It's too busy. There's too much going on, too many images, and it's just not really good for the presentation. Another thing that happens is that, and this is a little bit blurry, but another thing that happens is that people just cram their slides with information, cram their slides with bullet points, and it's just difficult for people to follow along. One of the major problems for this or with this is that people will start reading the slides and they'll forget that you're speaking. And when you're delivering a presentation, you want people to be engaged. You want people to be engaged with you as a speaker. You want people to pay attention to you. And so one of the reasons why people have all this information in the slides is because they use the slides as their notes. And that's a big no-no. You want to prepare ahead of time. If you want to have your notes in your hand, you can do that. but don't have your notes on the slides, because that's just going to cause this where there's too much text, too much information in your slides, and they're just not very good in terms of aesthetics, but also in terms of just effectiveness for the audience. Nobody wants to read all this information, and they might not even be able to read it because the font is so small, but also they might not have enough time to read all this information. So let's go to tip number one. Let's go to tip number one for how to create better slides. And the first one is use slides as a guide for the audience. You don't want slides to take over your presentation or speech. One of the things that I really like to teach is that your slides should be there to support and to enhance your presentation. They shouldn't be there to be the main attraction. They shouldn't be there to be the main thing in the presentation, because you are the center of attention. And I know that some of you might hate that phrase. Some of you don't want to be the center of attention, but the reality is that when you're presenting to a group, when you're presenting to a class, you have to be the center of attention, because that's where the information is coming from, right? So if you're going to use slides, if you're going to use visual aids, use them as a guide for you, and it's okay to follow the slides. It's not okay to just read everything off of them, but it's good to have slides because they help you as stepping stones through your presentation. They also help the audience through the presentation as if they were stepping stones. So tip number one, use your slides as a guide for the audience and for yourself. Tip number two, you have to really think about the size of your slides, because a lot of times I've seen people that create slides with a certain size, and then when they get up on stage and they project the slides up top, then it just doesn't look right. It looks squished and smushed. So 4:3 aspect is a one size of slide that you're going to be encountering, but for the most part, you want to use 16:9. Most projectors, most televisions, most screens, and most monitors nowadays are 16:9. So it is more likely that you're going to be able to use that. And they give you a little bit more space, right? They give you a little bit more area to work with, where you can move around the pictures, move around the text if you're using text and images. So 16:9, make sure that you're creating slides in this aspect ratio so that you have a little bit more room, but also so that they fit in what typically are people using nowadays in terms of a projector or a screen or a device to be able to project your slides. Tip number three, let's move on to number three, avoid bullet points. This is one that I truly believe in. You don't want to have bullet points. You might want to have a phrase or two in your slides, and I'm more recently going away from bullet points because it's more dynamic. It's a lot more visually appealing to the audience. Even if you're teaching a class, even if you're teaching something where there's a lot of information for the audience, you want to avoid bullet points. It's just so tedious. It's just so mechanical. I'm not saying it's illegal. It should be illegal because you can still do it. But avoiding bullet points is just going to take your presentation to the next level. It's going to be different from everybody else's presentation. And I've seen plenty of those presentations without bullet points, and they're fine, right? You want to keep your bullet points. You want to keep them in your outline. You want to keep your bullet points in your note cards, or you want to keep them somewhere else, but not in your slides. If you have to use bullet points, use them, but a little bit of text and few bullet points. Bigger text, bigger fonts so that people can read it, and not a lot of bullet points so that they're not too busy. So that's tip number three. Let's go to tip number four, which is one image per slide or per topic. Let's say that I was going to talk about economic prosperity. You find some visual that's going to help you illustrate what you're talking about. You don't want to have visuals that don't directly connect to what you're talking about, obviously. You want to have something that's directly connected to it, or that it tells people something, right? It communicates something to the audience. If you're talking about the economy, if you're talking about savings, if you're talking about retirement or bonds or stocks or something like that, you want to use images that are going to communicate that. And you want to have one image per slide, or one image per point, right? So that's the tip number four for better slides and more impacting visuals for your presentation. Let's go to number five. Keep your text high on the slides. This is a really easy one that most people sometimes fail to do, People like to move around the text, and I used to do this a lot as well. You want to move the text to the bottom, to the right, right? You want to be dynamic sometimes when you're creating your slides, and you don't want to be boring and very cookie cutter. But to tell you the truth, the best practice is to keep the text high and make sure that the text is really visible and legible, right? Because you want people in the front of the audience and you want people in the back of the audience to be able to read the text. Sometimes if you're way in the back and there's a bunch of heads in front of you, sometimes people wear hats, sometimes people are taller than you or taller than people in the back, they might not be able to read the font or the text if it's at the bottom of the slide. So keep your text on the slides way up. Obviously, you don't want to almost have it outside of the frame or the margins of the slide, but you want to keep it up there. Tip number 6, avoid crazy busy graphs and tables. We love to provide facts. We love to provide statistics. We love to provide, pie charts and bar graphs and all these numbers and information. But if you put something like this in front of an audience, it is not likely that they're going to go over it, right? If I'm going to sit down and go over a table like this, then, I need time. I need to kind of clear my mind and really understand what's going on. There might be certain situations where you need to show something like this. I guess it's okay. But for the most part, if you're going to talk about numbers and percentages and statistics and this type of information, then you want to avoid these type of slides. What you would like to do is something like this. You talk about the first numbers that you're talking about. You want to simplify because you want to make the information more digestible for the audience. So you want to simplify it, but numbers like this. And then if you're talking about, for example, the numbers or the problem that's 55%, only 55% of the population has internet access. And then you want to talk about the goal, which is reaching 100%, then you do something like this. People will remember numbers when they're simple and when they're easy to remember. When you have multiple numbers, multiple percentages, multiple graphs, bars, circles, and lines and stuff like that, people are not going to really remember. You're going to have to also spend a lot of time going through the bars or going through the graphs and going through the numbers and going through the statistics to help people understand. It's going to be a snooze fest. It's going to be a real snooze fest. So forget about all those numbers, forget about all those bars, and then you're going to have a lot more success and people are going to be more engaged in your presentation and you're not going to put them to sleep. Another tip that I've found that I've done a lot of research, and this is something that I always tell my students, is that you want to not have visuals. You don't want to have visuals when you're not talking about the visuals, right? And they call this going dark. So you want to have a slide that's not visible or something black, just to help people forget about, right? Forget about the slides that they were seeing or the slides that they're going to see, because they become a distraction. If you're telling people about a certain story, if you're telling people about certain things that happen, or something that has to do with the presentation that has nothing to do with the slides, then you want to go with a dark slide. You want to go with a black slide or a white slide, and you basically mute the visuals. That's what it's called. You're muting the visuals, because then they don't have that distraction. They're not going to keep looking at the statistics. They're not going to keep looking at what's up there on the screen. And that's going to help you retain and maintain their attention so that you can continue sharing what you're sharing, and so that you can continue creating an impact with what you're saying, not what they're looking at. So again, tip number 7 is don't show visuals when you don't need the visuals, right? Have a black slate or a back slide or a white slide, something that's neutral, that's not going to cause people to be distracted while you're telling that story. And finally, here's a couple of resources that I'll share with you. The first one is Unsplash, which is a collection of photographs that are in high resolution and they're royalty free. They're free for you to use. Obviously, you have to read through the information in that website, so you make sure that you're using them appropriately. Usually what they'll ask is for you to give credit to the photographer if you're using them on social media or something like that. But if you're using them for educational purposes, for your work or something like that, you might want to do a credit at the bottom of the picture. That's just ethical. It's good ethics, and it's good just good practice because you're giving credit to the author. But unsplash.com is a great resource where you can find images so that you can create amazing visuals. A lot of the images that you saw in this presentation are from Unsplash. Actually, all of them are from Unsplash except a couple of the graphs. And finally, Canva. Go to canva.com, that's canva.com. That's a great resource where you can create all sorts of stuff. It's almost like a Photoshop app where you can create flyers, where you can create all sorts of things, and they have awesome templates, and that's where I created these slides today. Obviously, I grabbed a template and I grabbed certain slides from that template, and then I adjusted things and I created it to my liking, to my style. Is if you noticed, I keep it very simple. I keep it with a nice visual for each slide and so on and so forth. And I really follow some of the things that I shared with you today so that my slides look the way they do. So create your own style. Find the font that you like. Find the colors that you really like. I like to keep it very easy and very basic with black font on white background. That's the best how we are able to better read fonts, right? You don't want to have a black background with a white font. I mean, you can do that, but it's not going to, the contrast is going to be different. People's eyes are going to get tired. So you want to keep it very simple. And definitely I recommend unsplash.com and canva.com so that you can create your presentation, so that you can create your slides, and so that your slides look a little bit like mine or even better than mine, because obviously I'm not a designer, but I can do really well with some of these tools and some of these resources. So there you have it. Some of the best tips that I can give you, 7 tips that I can give you so that you can create awesome slides for your classes, for your presentations, for your work, conferences, or whatever it is that you're doing, whatever it is that you're sharing with an audience. You need to create awesome visuals because that's almost an extension of your presentation. That's an extension of what you're doing in front of an audience. And if you have really crappy and really poor visuals, they're going to drag down the value and the effectiveness of your presentation. And feel free to subscribe to this channel. Feel free to share this with your students, with your classmates, with whomever needs to learn a little bit more about creating impacting visuals for presentations. That's it for today's, guys. Have a great one, and thanks for watching.